Welcome to another episode of the Healers of the World podcast with your host, Robyn On Earth. And today I'm joined by Dean Liprini, a name that many of you are familiar with, a very accomplished man and a very humble man that I hold a lot of respect for. Dean is a sacred sites researcher, a healer and guide who has spent more than 3 decades exploring the ancient landscapes of South Africa. Dean is the founder of the Sacred Sites Foundation of Southern Africa, and his life's work is devoted to uncovering the wisdom encoded in sacred stones, mountains, and temples. And through his healing practice and global teaching, Dean helps people to reconnect to the earth, to spirit, and to the ancient pathways of human consciousness. And I'm so excited to welcome Dean today and to hear more about how he was called to serving the land and its people in this way. I find it particularly interesting that a white man has been called to such deep, what I would see as ancestral work of the land. And while I have my own theories as to why this may be so, I know that Dean will have some really unique and interesting insights because of his unusual life path. And, I was just saying to Dean before we came online today, I didn't plan it this way, but it's really curious how things unfold, kind of like the zeitgeist of the week, because next week I'm launching my next course that is all around land alchemy and my experiences of walking the beauty way. And this online offering is aimed at creating a very practical and inspired support for us to walk in deeper and more sacred relationship with the earth. And yet, here I am talking to Dean today, who has walked this path so far and knows this path so well and is supporting so many others to walk this path too. And I just find the connection in all of this really harmonious and really beautiful. And so I'm personally, as with all my guests, so excited and so honored to be sitting here today in this way. And, many people know Dean because of his generous offerings, his generous walks and tours across South Africa, where he invites others to experience the sacredness of the land and its stories in the way that he does. And my own experiences, I was really fortunate to spend a day with Dean out on our land when we had newly acquired our farm, where he did some geomancery work to help me understand the stories of that piece of land, particularly with respect to getting clear on how and where the masculine and feminine energy lines weaved across the farm. And he even gave me some important insights into what we may encounter by living on the farm. And if the conversation flows in that direction, I'll share some of those with you. But it truly was such a gift to spend that time with Dean and to explore and experience the wisdom carried in the land the way he experiences it. And what I love so much about the work that healers such as Dean are doing is that they are reminding us that the earth herself is a healer and a teacher. And that when we slow down and we listen, we begin to remember a language that is older than words. And this is what captivates me about Dean's work so much. So, welcome, Dean. It's such an honor to sit with you today.
Thank you, Robyn. Thank you for having me on, and excited to see where our journey goes today. And happy to be sharing, whatever medicine I can with your viewers. And yeah, let's see where we go to.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dean. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in then. And you've dedicated your life, Dean, to exploring the sacred sites and the wisdom of the land. And I would love to hear about your story of awakening. The moments or the experiences that first set you on this path. How were you called to this work, and what was that like for you?
Well, I guess we all have our individual gifts that we offer, and it's about realizing what those that medicine, that gift is within us. And as a sacred family, we see within our own families, or maybe our collective family, the family model was always a part of the ancient people. The of humanity was the mother, the father, and the child, and they were essentially nomadic hunter gatherers that were existing on Mother Earth, and they had a very deep connection to Mother Earth and to each other. So for me, I always go back into this ancient model of the sacred family, um, and within this model, it was a family that was very much united together, where there was a lot of loving and support that was allowed to just evolve naturally. So when they came home every day to the same fire in the shelter or the cave, they would come together and they would share the food that they gathered together. They would tell stories. They would share the warmth of the fire. They would keep the fire going together. And they would potentially have sung and danced and kept their family spirit very strong in together, and they were allowed to become who they were as individuals. So when they sat around the fire, you had the grandmother, the grandfather, and the father and the mother and the kids and the grandkids. And when they were sitting around the fire and telling the stories and singing and dancing, whatever, there were also opportunities for them to look at the children, the young ones, and they were able to see immediately, at a very young age, what medicine these kids individually held. So within the family dynamic, you had the great hunter, the big guy or whoever who was really great at hunting and would often come home with something that they had caught along the way or hunted. You had the great storytellers of the family, and you had the jokers, the ones that actually made people laugh, and you had the medicine man or the medicine woman. You had the spiritual shaman or the guide, and none of them were seen as being more special than the other one. It was just a very, very important collective that the family held. So you had to have all these people with their different medicine that allowed for the family to survive, first of all, but also to feel strong within themselves and to be able to share. So the concepts of the sacred family during that period of time was always a small family network, which never really expanded more than maybe between 15 and 20 people at the most. And they knew that this was the model of how they had survived for hundreds and even hundreds and thousands of years. And of course, we know also that South Africa was one of these, let's say, origins of human culture, if you like. These are the terminologies that are being used. And within that model, that family model, it has to do with love, loving each other, caring for each other, providing for each other, protecting each other. And all those individuals were allowed to become who they were to contribute to the survival of that family. And there was not really, I don't believe, at that time, it was not a tribal consciousness. It was a family consciousness. So tribal consciousness is what sort of has evolved. So when at some point more than one family teamed up with another one, and they became bigger than the original model that had been holding humanity for hundreds and thousands of years and had worked like really great. So when that happened, that more than one family grouped together and they became 2 or 3 families, you ended up with this tribal consciousness, which suddenly shifted the dynamic within the family. So you had now a leader, a chief, and now that was someone who was elevated above everyone else within the old family model, and they saw themselves now as having more power and more energy to be able to take from others. So what happened is people started to, fight with each other over a particular sacred water source or a cave or whatever. So the tribal group knew, we can take that from those people. Let's go get them. And this, unfortunately, it is just what it is. It's not that it's right or wrong, but the tribal consciousness is still awake in humanity now. So now we have countries that are, governed by the tribal leader, the head of the government, and their followers, and they are still fighting with each other, and they are still taking from others because they had the bigger guns or the bigger weapons or more of them. So for me, it's very sad to see humanity shift from this original template of humanity that existed for so many hundreds and thousands of years. So I look to that model, and I believe that is what our true essence is as a human being on Mother Earth. So yeah, and I can't say that that's how my journey started. This is just an overview of where I'm coming from. And, as a child growing up in South Africa, I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 1965. And, right in the thick of apartheid, in a white family where my father held the same apartheid sort of awareness. He was just following the narrative, and you know I was definitely the black sheep of the family. And I was not a very good student at school. I was always, more like the class joker or whatever. And I did not conform to all the rules and regulations. And my connection to nature was amplified through surfing in my teens at school. And a group of us would always go out, whenever we could, get out and go surfing. And that was where my connection to nature really grew. Yes, my parents used to be part of the caravan club, so we did travel all over Southern Africa and live and spend time in nature through camping. And but surfing was definitely where I started to really feel myself as an individual being. And during that time, in our teenage period, right up until sort of matric, I never really delved into plant medicine or smoking, cannabis or anything at that time. We were too busy surfing. So when I reached I finished school, we all got drafted into the army, which was obviously no fun. But I managed to get myself shifted from, let's say, I was in infantry. I got drafted into infantry in Grahamstown, and it was a really crazy time where people were very young, and they were being, manipulated and indoctrinated into this war again, another war, to go and fight for whatever, which I of course had no interest in. So fortunately, I had a lieutenant that said, "Put your name down for a course so you can get out of here." Um, at that time, I just arrived from. I had done quite well surfing as a youngster, so I'd made Western Province at that time. So I arrived late with long hair, and I was not in favor with anyone. So I was supposed to get sports leave. It never happened. He said, "Look, do a course and get out of infantry if you can, or at least from that whole fighting situation." And the selection came, and they said, "Okay, you can choose one course." So I looked at the list, and it said drivers, medics. Uh, I was looking at all the ones that I wouldn't be fighting, drivers, medics, and I don't know, signalmen or something like that. So I put my name down for three, never mind one. I just put my name down for three, and it was drivers, medics, and something else. And then what happened was medics suddenly came up, was the first course that was leaving the Grahamstown camp. And they called my name, and off I went, and I did a medics course. And I ended up being a medic in the army. So fortunately, I was not out there killing people. I was learning how to heal people. So that was my sort of escape from the crazy war zone. And during that time, just sort of after my first year, I got transferred to Oudtshoorn, which was not far from where you are. And that was when I first started to experience cannabis. So that was one of my sort of introductions to, let's call them, using plant medicine to reach altered states of consciousness. And after the army, I had traveled across on a ship to the US and to Canada, actually, with a friend as workaways, and we got introduced to some little mushrooms that were living in the forest by someone. I met a Catholic priest who was smoking hash, and I met. We traveled. We actually traveled across for the whole of Canada and back again, meeting also on the sort of train. We would jump on the train and then jump off and head for the woods and camp out in the woods, and then come back again onto the train and go a bit further. And again, there was this connection to the indigenous people as well at that point, where we were meeting the Native American, Canadian Indians there, sharing magic mushrooms with them and things like that. And, when I got back to Cape Town, I started my own African arts and crafts business. I had met an African man in Durban, called him Tutuzeli Malloy, and which means the Black Wizard. And we befriended each other and started a business trading in African arts and crafts. So I got to travel at a very interesting time, when there was a huge clash between, black and whites at that time. But I lived and moved very, very comfortably with Mtutuzeli. And we traveled right up into Lesotho, into Swaziland, Zululand. He was Sotho, and the Transkei, and we traded. I traded with people, and the first introduction to, let's call it, the supernatural happened during that period of time. And we had, I won't go too long. I'll try to cut the story down a little bit. So we ended up in his village one day, back in his village called Pabalong, at the foothills of Lesotho, below Queen's Mercy, which was where the lightning witch doctor lived. And I tell you, I saw lightning like I've never seen before, moving across the mountain where that lightning witch doctor lived. I mean, the rays, the rods of lightning would hit the mountain and they would just stay there for like, I mean, I would say, 20 seconds. Yeah, I mean, that's how long one beam would actually hold. And it would walk along the mountain. And I was like blown away by this. And I started to ask him Tutuzeli about the lightning. And he said, oh, yeah, the lightning witch doctor lives there, and so on. And then we had tried to set up a gathering in the one room that a friend of his owned. And we had arranged we had done a soccer tournament. We sponsored it. It was quite fascinating. We had 27 teams from all over the Transkei and beyond that actually came and joined this soccer tournament. The Raging Lions, the Young Tigers, and all sorts of things. Because Mtutuzeli also had a team. So that's how that sort of manifested. And we were supposed to cash in. So we made lots of cash prizes and trophies and soccer balls. And then we were supposed to run a disco afterwards in celebration and make some money back. So we had arranged, we had bought a little generator and done all this, got the music system, and Tutuzeli was really excited. But the guy who had the school hall disappeared. He went to Lesotho the day that we were supposed to do this. So we couldn't do it. And we were stuck. And we ended up going back to his cottage, to his home, Pabalong, and we hired the witch doctor's tent for the night to run a disco, which we did, but we couldn't charge it much money. Like, we're talking about like R1 or R2, but everyone had a great party that night. But we didn't make any money. We made enough money to pay the Sangomas back for the use of their tent. So the next day we were stuck with nothing. We were back to zero. So Mtutuzeli says, well, why don't we do another disco tomorrow night, but we'll use my friend's home that is empty. There's two big rooms that were joined together, and we wouldn't have to pay. So I said, okay, that sounds great. And we went. There wasn't anything else to do, opportunity, so we did that. But that evening, I was sitting there waiting. It's like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock now. When there's a party and there's music, the people come. No one came. Not one person. Not one person. So I'm like looking at this and I'm thinking, what is going on? So I speak to him, Tutuzeli, and he says, I don't know, but maybe it's because there's a witch doctor that has visited the home in the main house next door, and he was staying there that night, and everyone was scared. They wouldn't come. This was a guy who had been called in by the family to find out what was going wrong. Energetically, something was not right. The money, the people were working in the mines. There was money coming in, but somehow it was just sort of disappearing. and there was something energetically amiss. So they brought this Sangoma from Johannesburg side for the first time into this village, Pabalong. He had never been there before, but he was supposedly a really good special Sangoma. So he comes there. So now I realize, okay, this isn't going to happen, the journey. So I'm parked outside in my old VW combi where we used to carry all the crafts, and I slept the night there. In the morning, I wake up just before sunrise, and I see this guy come to the door of the main house, and he's in his little white underpants, and he has a calabash in his hand, and he's talking to this calabash, and there is this high-pitched whistling sound that I hear, and he wasn't even there for like 3 minutes, and he called the people together, and he said, go into that room. And that was the exact room where we had put our speakers. It was empty, but it had a cow dung floor, which had been laid down for many, many, many years. And he said, look in that corner and look in that corner. And they looked in those exact two corners. They dug down in the floor about a foot deep. And at the foot, there was a goat horn that had muti in it, medicine, bad mojo, in both corners. He knew where it was exactly. He also knew who had put it there, and obviously the effects. So the next minute, we're all in the combi. We're heading off to the chief's house, because now this is a big problem. When we get to the chief's kraal, they tell me I must stay outside in the combi, in that area, and they all went into the hut to talk to the chief. While I'm standing there, it was a completely clear blue sky, not one cloud in the sky, just a beautiful day. As I'm standing there, a bolt of lightning hits the ground like 30 feet from me, like bang on the ground. So I'm like completely freaked, like what the hell is going on? And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just some electronic, stuff in the air or whatever, but whatever, just a chance, random thing that happened. But less than 1 minute later, another bolt of lightning hits the ground. Boom, again. Slightly different place, but the same thing, only 30 feet away from me. And I realized, hang on, this isn't just a random thing. Something else is happening here. So that was my first introduction to the supernatural, and also the ability of healers, shamans, whatever terminology you want to understand, their ability to connect with the collective spirit of nature, and their ancestors, in order to gain advice and guidance. And it was very profound. That within 2 days, I headed back to Durban. Someone wanted a cupboard taken, so we threw it in the combi. We're going to make a little bit of money. We'll go to Durban, where his mother was staying. And by the time I reached the location in Pinetown, my combi had a flat tire, and Tutuzeli said, "No problem, I'll go down and get it fixed." So he takes the wheel, and he's just gone. Like 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, no Tutuzeli. I'm sitting at the top under a big tree with a big lizard that used to visit me daily, one of those big bluehead lizards. And I decide, okay, I'm going to go walk about. And I walked into town and I got to the library. And when I got to the library, I was led to a book. I saw this book. It was called uh, African Myths and Legends. I get the book, I open the page, and there I see, right on that page, one of the most sought after witch doctors was a man who had a calabash with an unseen messenger that would report back to him in high-pitched whistles. So suddenly there was this confirmation. Well, hang on a minute, why am I, that I'm being led to this book, and now I'm seeing the connection to this guy that I had just met. So I think that would probably be one of the first sort of connections to how spirit was working somehow through me or guiding me. And yeah, that was how that happened. And then it wasn't long after that things changed. My combi eventually blew up, like they often do when they run out of oil. And I ended up back in Cape Town, and I didn't quite know where I wanted to go. And I looked in the newspaper because my dad, now I'm back at home. And of course, my dad is like freaking out, now what are you going to do? So I looked in the paper and I see Rebels Without a Cause phone Mr. Dean. I said, that's got my name on it. We'll do that. And I phoned, and it actually led me to a company in town called the Academy for Mathematics. And they were selling a home study program made by Decker and Dreyer, who were the authors of the textbooks back then. And I believed in the whole product, if you like. And it took me on a journey. We would go out into the various communities, from the lower communities to the high communities, and we would connect with people and offer them this audio visual home study mathematics, and it was a great product. And eventually we got to understand that some communities where they weren't math teachers were actually using this product, and the kids were passing. So I was inspired. I just kept going with the journey, and eventually we went on a field trip to Namibia, and we crossed the Drift river, which is just the other side of the Namibian border on the Orange River. And the leader of the group, the field manager at that time, he had hired a VW combi. And guess what? The VW combi blew up. And we ended up being stranded and stuck at Drift. And I got out, and we camped there while he disappeared back to Cape Town to go find another vehicle. And I walked along the Orange River banks, and there I discovered a huge panel of petroglyphs, carvings that were done by the early peoples. And I was absolutely transfixed with this massive panel that would have been almost like at least close to 2 meters in size. And it was like a map showing the energy of the river, the water, different birds, elephants, animals. And it was sort of telling a story of the life at that time. And I looked around me, and the whole area was covered with stones, just a mass of stones all over. And in the mass of stones, there was one stone that was dark black, and it was shining. And I walked over and I picked this stone up, and it was the the hand tool that was used for doing this, what we call hen pecking, the dot to dot engravings, how petroglyphs are made. So I sat with that stone in my hand that night, and it was as though the stone was speaking to me. It was telling me a story about itself, its own nature and its own spirit, and also about the nature and the spirit of the person who had chosen it and turned it into this stone tool. And as I held the stone in my hand, it was triangulated and truncated. I have a picture in my book. I don't know if I can share it or not. Here, can you see that picture there?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
That
Wow.
was a sketch of the actual stone, and it had finger grips for each finger and a thumb grip that went over the top, and it was triangulated and truncated. And
Mm.
what that meant is that every time you held it like that. Whenever you struck down, the triangulated tip, which was rounded, would always hit in exactly the same spot. So it would be like dot, 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 like the hen's beak, pecking. And so suddenly I realized that this was not just like some clumsy clod, like unconscious tool. It was actually a very, very specialized tool that had been almost like mathematically designed for the right weight, the right kind of texture or cross-bedded geology, if you like, to hold the strength and to be able to perform this task every time. So my whole connection and understanding of these ancient early peoples was elevated. The whole, no longer were they just sort of some prehistoric, stumbling around cave people or whatever. They were actually very conscious beings. And when I returned to Cape Town after that experience, I was led up onto onto Lion's Head. And when I walked up onto Lion's Head, I walked into what I believe was an ancient stone, what I called then a Stone Age telescope. And this was actually a human head. You see this
Mm.
picture? Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a 10-foot granite like head or skull. That's a person sitting underneath there, to give you an
Wow.
idea.
Yeah.
And this stone head was orientated to the cardinal directions, and I was led to come back on my own on the full moon. I came
Mm.
back, I went into meditation, and during that meditation, just before sunset, there was a rabbit, and it was a white rabbit. And I told them, Alice was not here, and I was not indulging in any major psychedelics either at that time. But the rabbit was very real, and
Mm.
it spent the entire night with me. And I was led up and down the mountain in this kind of stepped pyramidal format, if you like. And by the morning, I had got this incredible download of how the ancient peoples were using the sacred landscape to observe the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars, and their connection, direct connection to these stars. So that human skull head with the eye faces due east, and all the stars of the ecliptic path would sink through that
Mm.
eye at night, and of course in the early hours of the morning. And it was what I believe was a tool that they connected to the star realms and to the cosmos in their own way. And I was completely blown away. Other things happened on that night, but we will not. I'll try not to drag it out too long. So, understanding that it was a very ancient sacred place and to do with the stars, and I'd called it a Stone Age telescope. The next morning, I got down and I found a map, downloaded it, got it printed with the contours and all of that, and I knew exactly where I was on the map. I pointed it there, put a dot on it, and I drew a direct east-west line across. As I followed the line across, it cut straight through the South African Astronomical Observatory, right through their telescope. So I thought, hang on a minute. I called this a Stone Age telescope. Now it's connecting to a modern day telescope. Is there something that I'm missing here, or there must be something going on? There's something significant. So that was my next port of call. I actually went to the to the observatory, and I spoke to them there, and I told them briefly what I was experiencing, and they said, "Oh, what you're experiencing is archaeoastronomy. That's the study." And they gave me some formulas to plot the movements of the sun and the moon, and I was feeling really deeply immersed in this energy. And I started to travel around the mountain, and what was happening is the mountain started to call me. There was kind of a vibrational connection to these very interesting pivotal points around the mountain. So I would just follow, and I would go up the mountain, and then I would walk into this same kind of sun, moon, earth, star temple sites. And when I would spend time there, I would start to feel a connection that was potentially a part of my ancestral self. And I was remembering and how the people that were there in this ancient time were connecting to that site and using it as a tool to connect to source in their own way. So I kept following this path, following the call, and was led up to all these places. I would sketch and I would draw, and what was happening is it was as though I was being given the first chapter or the first page of a much bigger book. So eventually I resigned from the Academy for Maths because which I did very well in, by the way, at the end of the day, within 1 year. But then I left just like that. And I said, I'm following this path. So the guidance was to follow the pathway of the sun. And that was the title, that's the title of the book, Pathways of the Sun. So I got on my little motorbike and a little 80cc chappy. Off I went, following this kind of spiritual call. And the same thing, I would be led to a certain point. I would stash my little motorbike in the bush, and then I would go up and go and see what I was being called to. And then a part of me wanted to see, is there a pattern? Is there a spiritual formula that these ancient peoples were working with? And the only way I could do that was to travel and follow the path, which I did over a period of probably 8 years or so. And the pattern kept repeating itself. There were rocks that were definitely positioned, so there was definitely hands-on connection. There were some stone drums and sound things that we'll potentially touch on a bit later. But the same formula, and it didn't matter what the rock type was. So it wasn't a weathering pattern. It was in quartz, I mean, in granite, which is igneous
Mm.
rock. It was done in metamorphic quartzitic sandstone. It was done in conglomerate, the same shapes, the same forms, the same positioning of rocks, the same alignments to the sun, to the moon, to the stars. So I was really bewildered, trying to think, even for myself, why am I, a white guy, suddenly being immersed into this connection to these ancient sacred sites? And yeah, I followed this guidance. I ended up at a place which is known as Arch Rock or Cathedral Rock in outside of Plettenberg Bay, a place called Kierboomstrand, which is also an ancient burial ground of the early San and what people would understand as the beach walkers, the strandlopers. So I ended up actually living in the jungle there in the bush for a period of time over probably about 5 or 6 months, where I did come in and out, but for the most part I lived off the land. I already had knowledge of living off the sea, so I would catch fish, I would eat mussels and oysters and all these wonderful things. I foraged from the land a little bit. I ate tree mushrooms that I had no idea whether they were edible or not, but I just was guided to them and ate them. And that particular place is where my spiritual awareness and consciousness took a major quantum leap. And what happened is I was introduced to the spirit dream plane. So what transpired is I went off to go harvest some food for the day, and I picked these little abalone. They are perlemoen, as us South Africans would know. But they were the small ones. They don't actually grow much bigger than 7 centimeters in size. They are known as the Venus ear, small little abalone. So when I was harvesting them, I grabbed a few alicrickle and some seaweed, and then I was feeling quite guilty because for me that was a baby perlemoen, and maybe I shouldn't be taking it because it's too small. So I had this dialogue going through my head and this connection to spirit again. So I sort of did a prayer, a connection to spirit, and I said, okay, if I catch a fish, I will put the abalone back. So I go, the tide's coming in, so I go and I throw in my line and I catch a fish, but it's a little streepie about this big. So I'm sitting there with the little streepie, and a friend had, I'd ended up with a kitten, baby kitten, that I'd left in my camp. So I'm looking at the food for the day and the fish, little fish, and I think, okay, well, if I'm going to give something to the cat, I'll keep it all. So I kept it all, and we had a nice meal, the two of us, and it was great. Then that night, I entered into a now that I know is a spirit dream, where I was in a sea cave, and there was an ebbing and flowing of the water, and I was in the back of the sea cave looking out, and there were 5 abalone, the big ones, on a rock shelf in the cave. So I'm looking at these abalone, and I'm wondering now, who do those abalone belong to? You know, they sort of seem out of place. And I turned around, and what would have been the back of the cave, the whole back of the cave opened up into a Chinese village in the 14th century that was in full swing. The wooden carts, the cobblestones, everything. And out of the crowd of the local people came a man with a long black flowing robe, dress. And he definitely appeared a lot above in stature than the other people. So he came walking past me, and I said, "Excuse me, who do these Pelemun belong to?" And he turned and he looked at me and he said, "That is the food of the Mandarin." Now, well, one, because I actually wasn't a very good student at school, but I had no idea what the hell a Mandarin was at that time. Zero. Not even the Mandarin orange at that time. So I asked the question again. I said, "Excuse me, what did you say? Who do these Pelemun belong to?" And exact same words. He looked at me. He said, "That is the food of the Mandarin." So after that experience, I woke up. I remembered the dream. The very next morning, I headed into Kierboomstrand to a friend's mother who lived there at that time. I knocked on her door and I said, "Can I look in your dictionary?" So I opened the dictionary to find out what a Mandarin is. And when I opened the dictionary to where it said Mandarin, it said the Mandarin was seen as a teacher or as a spiritual guide. So suddenly it's like what? And there was a connection. And what it did for me is it told me that this was a spirit dream and that I was receiving information from a time period that I have no connection to in this lifetime at all, to a culture that I have no real understanding of, um, and being given this kind of spiritual message or guidance. And many years went by before I totally understood what that dream really meant for me. And there's two things. One, that abalone actually is a brain food. So you can go look this up. And it is one of the foods that the early peoples also ate, and may very well be the chemical dexohexanoic acid, whatever is in there, that stimulates the brain and potentially allows access into this dream state, into the dream plane, which now I know after many years is a very real place where we actually can access aspects that are potentially parts of our ancestral past. So we are actually able to connect with other healers, even in present day time, but also into ancient times. And some of those time periods may actually be a part of us as well. So the dream plane was really a very big spiritual quantum leap for me. It broke down any, if I had any uh, cultural sort of blockages where, oh, these people are there and those people, they completely fell away. Suddenly everything became connected. There was no separation between yourself and all these other cultural beings that have been around for forever, and that actually we have access to this collective of our humanity through the dream state. So the dream state has been very much a part of my spiritual path, and where I have received guidance and information from other healers, both in present day and in the past. Um, and the same thing, I could go on and talk all about the different spiritual dreams that will show you how they actually work. But the connection to the East and to the Chinese and to the Mandarin is very much was one of the first spirit dreams, and where I believe my geomancy comes from. So the geomancers of the East were the ones who were earth diviners. They could read the what they used to call the dragon lines or the chi energy. So my ability to feel the earth energies and the spiritual energy flow, I believe, comes from a past time period where I was doing that in that lifetime. And now I am remembering that gift in this lifetime because I'm supposed to be using it in this lifetime. So that's the dream state. Did you want to ask anything more about that?
Well, I mean, Dean, I could sit and listen to you all day. I'm going to have you on here again because I'm just absolutely captivated. But I want to share, and there is a question in this because one aspect of your story that I find so interesting is that original tool that you found on the border of Namibia, when you were camping at the river. Because I recently was led to a book by a lady called Teresa Dentino, and she's a Dagara diviner. And she talks about, and she used a word, and I can't access it right now, but it was like thermaton or something, where in past lives, we sometimes take objects and we put them on the earth and they hold code for us so that when we reincarnate, we find those objects. And so that's why this really caught my ear because, you know, you spoke about the download that happened when you were holding this object, and that's exactly the way she was sharing the way these talismanic objects that we left from previous lifetimes work. And so yeah, I'd like to know if you've got any resonance with that, and also how that information came through to you when you were receiving that download.
Oh, most definitely. So
Yeah.
all the sites that I travel to hold memory. Uh,
Mm.
they continue to carry the stories of the collective past. So many of the sites that I am led to are yes to the stone tool, yes to the remembering,
Mm.
and yes, the stones do hold memory. So again, more than likely, that was my stone tool from way back then.
Mm.
And I was reunited with it, and it was able to again to activate something in me. Because after that stone, that was when I was led back
Mm.
to Lion's Head, back up the mountain, connect with that, another download from that site, and of course the granite rock is the bones of the earth mother. So they carry what people would understand, or as I understand, the song lines and the collective song of our Mother Earth and everything that has happened here. So again, they contain quartzite and silica and mica. And these are all ingredients of your transistor radio. Your early transistor radios were quartz crystal radios. So they do hold memory and they do carry sound. And we do have the ability to plug in, just like the avatar, plug in and receive the downloads, the information that we need at that particular time. So so what happens is you get the first like I said, you get the first page or the first chapter. But if you stay true to your path, you may be led back there, which I have on multiple times to the same site. Every time I come there, I have a particular ritual that I do in order to help myself to connect more deeply with the place. And then I get the next chapter, the next page of the book. And so it goes on. Over the years, I've obviously managed to receive a lot of information over this long period of time, and now my kind of role is also to bring this forward. So whether I'm sharing it with you now on a podcast, I'll probably have to end up doing some of my own similar podcasts to disseminate the many layers of information that I've received for that exact purpose, to support others on their path of reawakening. So, yes, rocks do hold memory.
Dina, it's such a privilege to listen to your story, and I'm certainly going to be watching out for when you share the rest of this information. It sings to my soul in a way that I can't tell you. And one of the things too that really strikes me about your journey, and why I think it's so important to hear these stories, is the time that it takes for us to become tenderized, to be able to receive the full picture. Because there's such a rush in new age spirituality. We're all in such a rush to become elders, and we're in such a rush to get the codes, and we're in such a rush to get the keys. And it's just one of the things that really struck me from your story, the maturing, the tenderizing, the readiness that comes from the bread trails, and the trust that's developed in self, and the humility that's developed on that path too. If all the chapters of the book were downloaded all at once, I imagine that so much of the sacredness of the message actually gets lost because we're not tenderized enough to hold all of it. And so that's why we receive it in chapters the way we do. And so it's just a reflection from what you've shared, that really, yeah, I really felt that, and it really sat with me as I was listening to your story. And yeah, and it makes me so grateful that you did keep following those breadcrumbs, because now we can learn from the path that you've walked. And if the path was easy and obvious, it just wouldn't hold the worth, would it? um
Yeah.
because I'm sure there've been many times where the naysayers and the voices in your head, and have I lost the plot, and am I going crazy, and as you said, y- you know but that's all part of it. And it builds the eldership that you now carry, and is so evident from the retelling. So I really appreciate that. And
Yes.
the other thing that I just want to reflect on too is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. I mean, I was drawn to the teachings of Credo Mutwa and Malidoma in my early 20s, right? And so that kind of like opened a door. But in the last 6 years, I have been reading Malidoma's books again, and just the incredible magic that sits in Africa. Like,
Mm.
so many of and maybe I say this as a white woman, but as someone who's interested in magic, there's just so much literature on magic from the Northern Hemisphere. So much. And I think it's
Yes.
because so much of what sits in the South is an oral tradition, as most of the beauty ways and animistic traditions are. They're oral traditions, and not that much is written. But when I read the stories from Malidoma, it's just the incredible wealth of magic that sits on the African continent. And I felt to reflect that, because I'm like speaking to the converted here. I mean, you must know that better than anyone, just the history that lies on this incredibly diverse continent of ours, and the stories that need to be told.
Absolutely. The oral traditions, especially of the Sand people, have been, uh, a lot of them have been so lost. What happened in Southern Africa, was people would use the term genocide. Uh, it happened in the mid 1700s, shortly after the arrival of the European settlers. Smallpox hit the Khoi and the San communities, and it actually wiped out 70% of the population in like 6 months. Boom, just like that. So what happened is that the keepers of the knowledge, the storytellers, these great pearls of wisdom were lost very quickly. So when you have a healer, uh, they will have a trainee with them, usually one or two, whatever form of spiritual medicine or healing or storytelling or keeping of the sacred knowledge. These people would be sharing it with the people that were chosen because that's who they were. Remember, we go back to the family again. That's the healer, that's the storyteller, that's the wisdom keeper. So they would be chosen, and they would then be mentored by the elder, and they would then obviously be able to carry on the storyline. But what happened is that when 70% of the population died within that short period of time, you had both the storyteller or the healer and his apprentice passing away at the same time. So suddenly, where they normally had this backup, they didn't have the backup disc. They had the backup in the elder, the next in line, and then the young initiate. When all three of them passed, or two of them passed during that period of time, it just disappeared. So the knowledge, some of it has been recorded, but a lot of it has been lost. And now, from my side, we need to access that information spiritually, energetically, by spending time in these sacred places. And it's not for everyone, because not everyone has to be the seer or the shaman or whatever. There's no difference where you fit into the your becoming who you are. In other words, you need to understand your gift. Don't I'm not saying you don't, because nothing's right or wrong. But you can't put what do you say, like a square plank into a round hole. So don't try become just the shaman because it's now like cool, like let's all become a shaman. Yes, we all are our own shamans in many ways. But some are chosen to be that and to bring forward this information. Why? Because they have the ability to access these aspects of their divine selves, and to go and see and come back and share. That's their role, that's their job, to be able to go back into these other time periods, and to be able to see potentially into the future a little bit, so that they can offer their guidance to their family or to their community, to help them on their journey. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So, Dean, I have a potentially tricky question, but I mean, let's just see how this goes. I'm curious if you have a theory as to, and when I say why, I mean, I'm not talking from the white man or even just like the man's like historical perspective, but I'm talking about from the Earth's perspective, why that shift happened at that time with the genocide in Africa in terms of the Earth story. And I don't know if, I'm asking that because I'm kind of leading us into the next part of the podcast, which is I'd like to hear your perspective on what you think's happening at the moment, because we can all feel that a shift is happening. But that time that you're talking about, there was a shift too that sent us into another time that I feel like we're starting to heal from now. So, do you have anything to reflect on with why, from an Earth's perspective, that genocide, that shift, that break happened at that time?
Well, I mean, at the humanity has been has been in this tribal consciousness for quite a long time. So there have been wars fought amongst the African peoples, amongst themselves, even amongst the Khoi people and the European uh, North American Indians. The only really unique peoples were, in fact, the San peoples who still maintained that family structure. Um, so I don't think it's the case of like seeing anything as right or wrong. It's just the nature of the the creative nature that has been taking place. And what has happened is now we need to look back at it and say, okay, well, we are where we are now, and what we are seeing is a dramatic shakeup globally, um, which is causing people to question the governance that is in place. And we're talking now tribal governance because that's what it is. It's the big chief at the top telling everyone else what to do and how to do it, or else. So that this awakening that's happening now is an opportunity for us to reflect on our collective past and to find ourselves, to find our core connection and cord that links us directly with source. And once we, so the shakeup is designed, I think, on a very divine level. I think that the earth is deliberately uh, and probably cyclically creating the opportunity for a quantum leap in a reawakening conscious connection to source again in our in this time period that we are right now. So when people are rocked like this in the duality game that's been playing out, like Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, vaccinated, non-vaccinated, however, whatever stuff is playing out, it's all very dualistic. So people are getting pushed this way, and then they're getting pushed that way, and they find themselves in the storm, this duality storm, and but that's a, for me, it's a good thing, because when you rock and eventually you get to a point where you're like, oh, you're about to fall over with all this flipping crazy duality playing out, is that you in that moment where you feel yourself about to fall, you suddenly find that inner core that pulls you back, and boom, you're right there, and you say, hang on a minute, like this is, I don't need to play this game to this degree anymore. I am centered within myself. I have a direct connection to source of all creation. We are all children of creation, and let that be my guide. That is my inner truth. So what is happening is this awakening again of humanity. And I think the core values of humanity that I began with in the beginning, that are from that early human model of the family, that has to do with loving, caring, nurturing, protecting, not the warring, the fighting, this taking, energy. And that's just my own personal opinion. It's not that this is right and that is wrong. It's just like this is played out, and now it's up to us to decide for ourselves what path do we want to walk into the now, into the future. Do we want to continue this warring, fighting? It's mine, I did this, egoic, patriarchal, let's just take it, because we can. Or are we going to nurture this other aspect, the loving, the caring, the nurturing, the protecting, the co-creating energy? And I think that that's where we are moving towards now, that opportunity. So I see three pathways right now that humanity are following. One, the AI. you know, People are, and I'm not, none of them are right or wrong. Okay, they just are. So the path of the AI, people will not give it up. There's going to be a whole bunch of people that love AI, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But they will embrace it and they will not give it up. They want the virtual, reality, or they want the digital bank system, the trading and the this and the that. That's the one path that is in place and is moving. Then the other is get me the hell out of here, off grid, unplug, self-sustaining, a little bit more of this community-based energy trading, sharing, like that. But this group that are moving off grid do not want the AI and the plastic money and the this and the that and the that. So they're on the other extreme. And then there's the third group, which is obviously in the middle, where there is a space for people, and people are filling that space between the off-grid, organic sort of self-sustaining network, and this other group that remain in the in the system, if you like, in the system. So there will be a space for this person to be trading between the two, like the go-between, if you like, because the people in the AI zone, or in the main system zone, they still want the organic food and the organic products from these people that are over there. So there has to be a bridge, and that is the bridge. And those three pathways may even be adopted into your own state of being, and you learn to manage it as you go forward. But it will be the collective going forward that will shape the future. And we each need to find ourselves, find our medicine, who we are, what our gift is, and then essentially have a very clear intention of how we want to walk forward into the now, and start to seed those intentions into our family or into our community, and nurture them, just like you would a plant, a tree. Nurture them and sing them and seed them back into the conscious collective grid. And then that song will then start to be available for the collective to access as well. So the vibrational resonance and the creative force of our Mother Earth is not separated. We are intrinsically woven into it. So whatever we're doing and whatever we're thinking and whatever we're praying for and intention wise is most definitely having an effect. You cannot this is as we would see if you can see it as the universal choir. Yes, you have an earth choir, what's happening here on the earth, but we are part of a much bigger collective consciousness of creation. And as we know, we are essentially born from this creative song of love and light, essentially. So we are the song and vibration of the color of light. So we need to offer our true and pure soul song back into the choir and sing it back in. You cannot not be a part of the choir. Everyone is a part of the choir, and no one's voice is any different or any better. I mean, it is different, but it's not necessarily any better. We're just part of the choir. And if we want to be a part of shaping the song going forward, we need to sing that song back into the universal choir from our heart and from that space of love and compassion for each other, for creation.
Yeah. It's beautiful, Dean, just so beautiful. And while you were talking, there were two reflections that were coming up in me. The one was a fourth pathway, which I just want to put out there for what it's worth. And that is allyship, because, as humans, we aren't the only sentients on the planet. There are the animals, and there are the plants, and there are the trees, and incredible wisdom and sentientship that lies there. And I have no doubt that there's so much allyship that you would probably count as your teachers, because I imagine, as a person who's learned to listen to their environment, I'm sure that the voices of the elementals and the animals and the plants come through to you. And so there's this fourth path of recognize, and that isn't separate to the others. I mean, but just this path of allyship, and really stepping into our role as custodians as well, and of stewarding the earth and actually welcoming in to our consciousness, welcoming back in, that song, as you so beautifully express, that the different notes of that song are also made up from the different realms of beings on this planet. And that was just something that came through as I was listening to you. And the other thing that came through, and maybe this is a little bit more Robinified because of, the deep contemplation I've been doing in looking at the role of the feminine on the planet. My work's taken me into looking at the border cycles. I mean, we're talking thousands of years where the planet moves into a more patriarchal age, and then it moves into a more matriarchal age. And I really believe that there is a calling. I don't know if we're going to meet it, but there is a calling for unity, which is actually the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is about balance and unity. It isn't about the pendulum swinging too far into the feminine and the pendulum swinging too far into the masculine. But where I'm going with all of this is that because of your beautiful storytelling today, Dean, and the way you've reminded us about how stone carries memory, right? The earth carries memory. It made me think of the fact that water carries memory too, and earth carries memory. And water and earth are the feminine elements. Fire and air are the masculine elements, as everyone knows. And I just felt intuitively when I was listening to you, there being something around the feminine elements holding memory, bringing us back to our more ancient ways and bringing us back to this honoring of mothering, right? The mother. And
Yes.
and I just felt like I wanted to share that because I adore what you shared about the wisdom that you started off the session with of the family versus the tribe, which was all around loving and nurturing. And those are, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I love the sacred masculine as much as I love the sacred feminine. So this isn't an either or. I just feel like it's opening up space in a society that is so dominantly patriarchal because it's a mind-based culture. These days, most of us live from our minds and not our hearts. And just the role of water and earth in bringing us back to that place. of a more nurturing way of being because of the memory that holds.
No, absolutely. So the majority of the sites that I work with hold a very strong feminine component. So we don't have anywhere near enough time. But, over time, I will be sharing a lot of that information. But there are many, many sacred places that personify the sacred feminine, and they were chosen to be the sacred sites, and not only in Africa but all over the world. So some of the earliest religions are based on the Mother Earth belief structure. And here in Southern Africa, the sites that I work with are the mountains with the big breasts, the pregnant belly, the egg-shaped rock placed there. So they were all places that were honoring the sacred feminine, and were places where the springs were birthed. So
Mm.
when you approach certain sites, there is protocols that you follow, and it is about connecting to the water first, and greeting the waters of the mountain before you even approach. And the plant kingdom, the same thing. I work with the plant medicine, the natural herbs. So people will know I travel with my flask of hot water, and whenever I come into a sacred place, we greet the land before we even go, ask to be drawn to those plants that will help us to connect to this collective song. So the plants are immersed in the collective song of the earth in that particular area. So when we make a tea from it very consciously and harvest respectfully, we are tapping into that and allowing that song to flow into us. But I would say, yes, the further you go back, you get back into the matriarchal and the understanding that the sacred feminine in these ancient early times was the most important thing, one of the most important things, both from a physical and spiritual perspective.
Mm.
So the ancient peoples could see it. It was already there. They could
Mm.
see it every day. That it's quite simple, without the womb, nothing exists. We
Yeah.
all come from that womb, and from the waters we are born. So
Yeah.
the ancient people always had this high regard for the sacred feminine, because without the mother, we don't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did the mother not give birth to the feminine and the masculine? But there's just,
Yes.
from my understanding, the mother is beyond gender. The mother is not, it's not a masculine or a feminine thing.
No.
It's the honoring of the cosmic womb that we're all from. Yeah,
Yes.
Dean, I'm definitely going to be checking out your calendar in months to come and seeing if we can get another session if you're open to it. Today has just been so special. I really am very grateful for your time. I know you've got some big work coming out. And so please, guys, to those of you listening, all of Dean's links are below, all of his, the ways that you can stay in touch with Dean and his offerings. I know that most of you are already so familiar with Dean, and probably many of you listening to this have been on some of his walks that he offers at the key astronomical points on the calendar of the year. Dean's always got offerings in and around Cape Town, especially. So please check them out. But Dean, thank you so much. It's just been so much. Yeah, everything you do is always so generous. And the information that you've shared today has been nothing short of that. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thanks so much, Robyn, and we'll stay tuned until we meet again.